average year to, and I always tell everybody look at 2019 because it's what we're closer to right now, was like 2.7 months inventory. And I think that's probably what will end up in July. So
So
we're
it
going
doesn't
back
seem,
to,
yeah, it doesn't seem like that, like, you know, I mean, yeah, it seems like the hot housing market's over, but it seems like we're kind of going back to reality. Yeah.
and I think this is what's scaring people. So I hearing more and more from people like, I don't want to buy,
Reality
and
scares
I get
people.
it. Yeah. I get it. Interest rates are high. It sucks. But, and this leads to my next question. Where do you see interest rates going with the Fed announcing another 0.75? I mean, I think they're going to announce another 0.75 increase is what I've heard. So where does interest rates and all of this go in the future? And like, how much more does this actually hurt people or dissuade people from buying, or does it make them go, shit, I need to buy right now?
Yeah, I mean, well, you get both of them both happening. I mean, people, like, I get a lot of people telling me that they want to wait, like they want to wait
Yeah.
it out. And, you know, but then there's the other people who are like, man, I'm getting in now before it goes up even further, won't be able to make my payments. You know, like if the interest rates continue to go up, it's just that much harder every month to make those payments. So, I mean, there is definitely both schools of thought on it. Now, what I'm seeing coming from the Federal Reserve is that they're in a position that trying to get the Fed funds rate up to a reasonable level is going to be very difficult for them. You got to think the Federal Reserve really doesn't have a whole lot of tools. They can print money and they can drop interest rates. And when you have interest rates as low as they do, if it's at 2%, that does not give them a whole lot of room to drop and stimulate the economy. So like typically they would want to drop that interest rate, that Fed funds rate around 5%. They're not even close to it. So dropping the interest rates only 2% barely does anything to get people out there borrowing money to buy houses and cars and go on vacation and just, you know, spend that money. So if they can't drop the interest rates 5%, they're going to have to come up with other ideas. And they know that's the problem. So this is really where I feel that they are using the supply chain constraints that are happening now to try and boost their Fed funds as much as they can. Now, they put out the narrative out there, hey, we're trying to deal with this inflation by raising the Fed funds level as much as we can. Now, that perception onto the market, when they hear this, they're like, oh, crap, the Fed is going to lift the interest rates 0.75, 100 basis points. What is this going to do? So they start behaving in ways. The market actually conditions themselves to be in that position before the Federal Reserve actually moves the rates. And they claim to do this for the shock event, like they don't want to shock the markets. And so they put out this narrative so that they can condition them to be there. Well, that has the same impact. Just that putting out that credible threat has the same impact to the markets as if they had raised the rates. So they really don't have to do anything at all. They just have to make sure that people believe that they're going to do it. They do have to follow through with that credible threat. Like if they don't do it, then the markets will be pissed off about that too. So they do have to go through with that credible threat, but eventually they're going to get to a point where they're going to say, you know, we're going to be data dependent on whether or not we're going to be raising rates into the future. When they start saying that, you know that they're coming to a top, but they're not there yet. They're still trying to get that ammo back. And as long as they have 9.1 on the consumer price index or whatever it came in, whatever index they were following, because I shake my head at a lot of this stuff thinking, I don't know if that's really accurate. But when they have that going on out there and people are still stuck in the inflation narrative, then they can keep raising those rates. And that's them trying to get their ammo back. And so as long as they still have that, they're going to keep pushing those Fed funds level up as far as they can go, because that's what they want to use when next time they have a downturn, is to drop those interest rates.
Oh,
Did that
man.
answer it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack there though, you know,
I'm sorry, man.
No. I mean, this is why I watch your channel. Cause I feel like you do a very good job of kind of breaking this down for the average person. Right. You know, we had an economist or a lot of people shredded us for this, but we had a guy come on who is a founder of a large financial company. And he kind of gave us an economic update and what to expect in the future. And what's interesting, what difference between like what you're saying and what he's saying, he said that we hit that before the news came out, that we had hit the top of inflation, and then 9.1 came out. So do you think inflation is going to start coming back down soon? And do you think people are going to start traveling if gas prices come down? I mean, these are two separate questions, but the two things that people want to know the most about.
Okay. There's a couple of things. Like inflation is a very odd thing to talk about, especially when people have a different perception of what inflation is. Like a lot of people will go like, look how much I paid for, this meal I spent out, or how much it costs for gas. If you really think about the definition of inflation, inflation is the expansion of money and credit. And so that's really what inflation is. Prices are the results of that. So prices are more of a symptom of inflation. And so when you see the Federal Reserve expanding the money supply out there, that's truly like what the inflation is. When you see people borrowing money, that's the inflation. So if you have less people borrowing for houses and cars and, taking out credit card debt, if they're actually paying off their debts, that's deflation. That's like the actual deflation taking place there. The results of that take a while to actually enter into the economy. So like even when the Federal Reserve raised their interest rates, it takes like 6 months to a year before that really starts impacting the real economy out there. The perception that people take is right away, like the markets will start doing things about it. But the real like economy, the actual sales, the actual things that are happening, the transactions, that takes 6 months to a year to be impacted by those lifting of interest rates. So I don't know, I guess I kind of got a little bit off track on that, but that's really where like inflation, I think, is probably misunderstood, is that when you see these supply constraints taking place and that drives up the price because you got a supply and demand issue, everybody points at the Federal Reserve saying money printer and prices go up. And yeah, those two facts are happening there, but there's different reasonings for what's causing the prices to move up. When you have like at the same time this quantitative easing going on, it's very difficult to separate these two and say, no, these don't really have anything to do with each other. For the most part, they do, but they don't, right? You got the supply chain constraint happening, and that's really what's causing the prices to move up. The Federal Reserve and the monetary policies that are happening, that mostly ends up as bank reserves. Like you have to borrow that money to get it into existence. The stimulus, that was like an injection of money. But really, on the grand scheme of things, it was a short-lived stimulus. It was just like a temporary like boost to the economy. And that is like unproductive debt. So it's due back plus interest rates. So the way I kind of relate it is like, okay, so here's stimulus, go get high off of it, enjoy the time, but here in a little bit, you're going to have to work hungover to pay all that stuff back. And that's not a good feeling to be in. Why is that funny?
I imagine everybody not realizing that they're going to have to work hungover.
Yeah.
One of the most wild stories I ever have when it comes to all of that, with the unemployment and everything, is back during the pandemic. We have a beach condo. And so we were out there and this group of people were just sitting there getting hammered. And they were talking about all their stimmy checks and how much money they could buy with all the weed from their stimmy checks and their employment. And I'm sitting there going, you do realize that like, so that's what I'm thinking of when you say that, having to work hungover. I'm just imagining those people having to go back and go to work. So definitely just an odd vision in my mind.
I mean, you can relate the economy all the way down to just your personal self. I mean, it's sometimes it's not as easy to look at that way, but when you go deep into debt and you weren't productive with that debt, then you have to postpone your current spending in order to pay for the past consumption. There's no difference when it comes to the major economy too, when it comes to macroeconomics. At some point, I mean, you can keep trying to go into debt, but it's just that makes the problem worse. And I mean, I'm not saying that it isn't going to happen. I mean, it seems to continue to happen, but at some point you're going to find that you're going to have to work and not buy anything in order to pay off your debts. And that's not fun. I mean, I had myself very deep into debt. I had hardly any income coming in. I didn't really have a whole lot of resources. Walking to work every day and taking $20 bills to go down and pay off a $9,000 credit card, there was nothing fun about it. I had to do it for a long time. But then when eventually it ends, well, then your life starts getting better again. But you have to postpone all the fun and consumption and debt and everything else that goes with it. And nobody wants to do that. Nobody does. And especially politically, that would just be suicide. Nobody's gonna vote for somebody who does that.
Thanks for watching this short of the Real Amigos podcast. For more live streams, hit here. For more clips, hit here. We'll catch you on the next one.